Good morning, my creative friends, and welcome to Painting in Your PJs with Minette. I'm Dr. Minette Riordan. I am here in my studio in Loveland, Colorado. Delighted to be gathering live with some of you. Welcome also if you're here watching the replay. And if you like what you see today, it helps me a ton if you click that like button and let people know this is a video worth watching. So this year I am focusing on what I am calling the Paper Doll Chronicles. We're about a month in to this Thursday series. Super excited about the series and having a lot of fun thinking of all the different ways that I can use. Sorry, I haven't talked much this morning. My voice is still a little froggy. And thinking about all the different ways that I can use paper dolls for personal growth, but also for fun and play, because I believe, hold on just a second. All right, take a sip of water. Hopefully that's better. Froggy morning voices. Okay, fast forward through that part, and if you're live, I apologize for my froggy throat this morning. So good morning all the way from Malta. Welcome, Lorraine. Great to have you here. So this season of creativity on Painting in Your PJs is focusing on paper dolls for personal growth, but they're also amazing for incorporating into art journals, for getting better at drawing, for thinking outside the box, adding texture and layers and collage elements maybe in ways that we haven't before. Traditional paper dolls were all about having a body form and then adding removable clothes to those forms, but paper dolls simply can be movable figures like this one that aren't attached to your journal. And I shared in the last episode or 2 episodes ago about how to use these in an art journal, how they tell stories when they connect. But when I started thinking about how can I dive even deeper into this idea of using paper dolls to explore different parts of self, some of the own healing work that I'm on right now, which is really a lot about ancestral healing and the mother line and that beautiful red thread of honoring, celebrating all of the women that have come before me through my mother line. It got me thinking a little bit differently about expressions on faces, about positions of the body. There's great, good morning. There's great stories and studies done on body language and power poses, but we can also incorporate some of these things that we're seeing out in the world or hearing about into our paper doll making to go a little deeper into this really beautiful introspective journey. So I'm gonna go ahead and change my screen. So I had some fun last week with playing with some different images that I found. Hey, Teddy, happy to be here with you today. And looking at these different women and starting to think about, well, what do they represent? Hi, Yvonne. Good morning. Good morning. And thinking about what direction are they looking? How is their body being held, right? How are they standing? So there's a lot of sort of slouchy, confidence here, body confidence. This one feels very introspective, gazing off into the distance. We have this beauty in her short dress and her power pose. There's a little curiosity, a little sassiness here. And I really love this very motherly doll that feels like this very sage, wise woman. And when I started playing, this paper was way too thin for doing what I wanted over the top. So I'm going to try something a little bit different. And this weekend, brave the snow and the cold to get outside and go to a fun little flea market and antique mall. I was looking for some inspiration, and I found these old magazines with Vogue patterns. And what cracks me up is like how tall they all are. So I actually had to find some paper that was very tall because I want to work with these today. So they're all very tall and very slender. And so I'm going to also look at how can I make them feel a little bit more like me. But again, this is honoring, women of the past. So I have pulled out a few, and these are from 1979, right? So these are volumes of Vogue patterns from 1979, and they're super fun. They have some photos. Look at those men's caftans. Those just totally cracked me up. My husband was like, "What the heck? There's no way that I would ever be caught wearing something like this," right? And these fun jumpers and those hairstyles and all the ruffles and the lace. So this was a time when women were playing different roles in society, right? And clothing styles were a little bit fascinating. Like, look at those patterns on this pantsuit, right? Crazy colors, lots of hair up. These are all, and if you look at Vogue today, the models are still very similar to what they wore then. But look at this beautiful confident power pose. This one's more like, I'm not talking to you. I don't see you. I'm kind of avoiding you. So we have all these different perspectives. Some of them kind of, so in 1979, I was in ninth grade. I was a freshman in high school, never slender. And, these probably weren't styles that my friends and I were wearing, but I can see that they're reminiscent of some of the things my mom might have worn. My dad was really big into the powder blue leisure suits and had a funny little mustache. Here's some more active wear. I definitely remember skirts and blouses like this. So it's fun to go back and look at these. There's some nostalgia here around these dolls. There's also some curiosity. But where I want to take these is how can we use these as inspiration for some of our own paper doll making in a different way. So what I'm looking for is I'm flipping through magazines or these old illustrations. I'm looking for different poses. I'm looking at the expression on the face. What is it that they're, good morning, Judy. What is it that they're looking, there we go, get a little more light there. What's the expression on their face, the direction they're looking? These women also feel very professional. So they kind of represent that aspect of myself that has been a business leader for over 20 years, very professional, clear about where they're going. I love that they're all, good morning, Jen, all wearing high heels as well. So this one was a little bit Indiana Jones-ish, right? Was kind of fun. And I'm also looking for dolls of different or illustrations of different sizes. This paper is very glossy, and I'm looking for ones that are whole body, right? So if I love this one, but I would want to add legs and feet to her as well. So this one felt very playful and impish. I loved the look on her face. So again, I'm looking to represent this one again, confidence. This one, that pose, hey, look at me. So just noticing this one, it's like the ninth grader in me looks at this and go, oh, she's so conceited and so full of herself. Noticing my reaction to the different looks on their faces, right? Like she doesn't care about anyone else. And I definitely went through a phase where I was pretty standoffish from other people. So this probably, because I'm having a reaction to this, it represents an aspect of me. This, I think, is that same model. Again, there's an intensity here. This felt very sort of, youthful and childlike. And man, those legs are long on these models. They crack me up. So these are great ways or just inspiration for making different kinds of dolls. And because I'm having a bit of a reaction to her, we're going to start here with her today. I also just went through my stash. I found some different scraps of so watercolor paper, some super thick paper. I think that was watercolor paper as well. And I am going to create some dolls on watercolor paper because it's nice and stiff. It's going to hold up to some mixed media. So I want to show you how I would create a doll, and I'll do a few of them. So one of the things that I'm focused on right now is kind of curating a collection of dolls, and once I have a variety, then I can go back and I can paint them, I can illustrate them, right? I can create templates for some of these. Like there's something about this one, I think it's this beautiful space that I'm dying to paint and add patterns to this one. I just love her, the confidence in her pose, but I've also worked a little bit on hands and faces on some of these using the images as inspiration, right? And so we want to get to where we can have a variety of facial expressions to help represent those different aspects of ourselves. So there's two ways that I could do this. I could color pencil all over the back of her and just trace her onto paper. But what I have been doing is losing my scissors. There they are. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut her out. I'm going to hold on to that one. I'm going to do a little fussy cutting here. And this, I'm noticing, again, this is 1979. Notice how big the shoulders are. Poofy shoulders back in that professional era when women were wearing power suits in the 80s with padded shoulders. Interesting times. I'm going to carefully cut her face because that shape of the face is one of the things that we're working on here. Curious how many of you went through a phase of wearing high heels at some point in your life or career. I think maybe briefly in high school I might have been intrigued by high heels, but I never liked having uncomfortable feet. So for me, that curiosity faded really fast when I remembered that they did not make my feet happy, especially in university where you're, walking long distances across campus. And I would say in college I was probably more interested in wearing cowboy boots than I was in high heels. All right, just focusing on getting her cut out, not having to be exact high heels early in your career. Right, it was the norm. It was almost expected. Like I'm still amazed when I go to events and see so many women wearing high heels. Life's too short to have unhappy feet. All right, I'm going to cut this white bit out. So I want her completely cut away from her background in order for this to work. And one of the things that is really fun to do with a magazine cutout like this, and I have another one over here, I'm going to demo that on. We'll see if we get there today, is to just paint the doll, right? We can just paint this figure, make it only a couple of times. Yep. Even for my wedding, I had little tiny low heels. I could cover this doll with either matte medium or clear gesso like we did with the face painting demo that I did on the weekend. And paint right over her to make her my own. So that would be one option. But one of my intentions is to create a series of templates that I can use over and over again. So I don't want to collage right over her, paint right over her, because I like this shape and I may want to use it again. So this one and the other ones that I showed, I definitely kept all of the originals for later use. High heels in a skirt. Jen, I believe it, right? It was the norm. All right, so here we have our character. So I'm going to start by taking this piece of watercolor paper. This one's even stiffer, but I think I'll save that longer one. So again, this is just a scrappy bit of, feels like 130-pound watercolor paper that I had in my studio. She just fits. I'm going to fit her over to the edge so I can probably fit someone else or even perhaps get two of her out of this page. And I'm going to start by just tracing around her with a pencil. Again, I'm not trying to be super perfect. We're just getting that outline in there. And if you find you're having a hard time holding her still, then just put a little piece of Scotch tape on the back, or just tuck one edge of her down with a piece of washi tape. That will help her stay put. And I can't believe we're almost on February already. So starting in February, we're going to have a new theme coming related to the month of love. So we'll be doing some specific dolls related to self-compassion, self-esteem, self-confidence, unconditional love. The more that we work on these topics, then the more we think about like what's stopping us or what's missing, what do I need more of. So she's pretty beautiful here, like that figure and that shape. There's an elegance to her that when I remove this, like I see something different. I see a different possibility. I see confidence. And let me find a different pencil. Bear with me. What have I done with my... I cleaned up. When I clean up, then I can't find anything. This one's good. So I am going to put some pencil on the back. I know you can't see that, but this is just graphite, big graphite stick. Where I know her hands are, I'm going to get a little graphite on there, and then I'm also going to do her face and hair. And I'm going to start with the face that's there, so that I practice getting the shape of the features, right? And then as I get better at drawing faces, I don't need as much, and hands especially. I won't need to rely on the lines. I'll be able to come in and draw those faces myself, but this is a great way to practice learning proportions, learning lines, especially when we're working on a face like this one that is pointed. She's looking away. Her eyes aren't looking at us. She had some little eyelashes there in the original. And you can just barely see that, but I'll go over it darker in just a minute. This is actually much better done with a ballpoint pen. So I'm going to come in here and do her hands and fingers. again, tracing. So it's a great way to get to the painting faster, which is the part that I love. Like the drawing is not as important to me. And it's a great way to kind of get used to the lines. Yeah, it's better. So you can see those a little bit better. And then I'm just going to come in here. I didn't do her hair, but we'll go ahead and do her hair. So she has a beautiful bun at the nape of her neck. I never had long hair. I have always had short hair. And if I want her to represent me, right, like I can look at what elements need to change to make that happen. So her nose is actually just over there. There's some shadows. And I'm noticing as I'm drawing her that I'm softening that look on her face a little bit. So here all of a sudden we have this beautiful female that represents strength, right? And I think I'm going to have some fun. I've been having so much fun getting my neocolors out that I might get my neocolors out again. We're going to come down here. We're going to finish off all of these lines as well. And we're going to those little teeny tiny shoes on there. And again, this is great practice for drawing. And then I'm going to paint her actually before I cut her out because it gives us an opportunity to like let things spill over. She's a little more stable on the page. And I can come in here and bring her sleeves back, those cuffs back. Let me decide I don't want them later. She's got long red fingernails. I'm looking at her now going, oh, the Derwent ink tints would be fun. And now I get to decide where to go with her. So when I'm looking at her again, what I'm really enjoying doing is creating these dolls that represent parts of self. So from my perspective looking at her, she represents confidence. I do kind of like that belt. I'm not a big high collar, so I can start to really add in elements that make her my own. She needs the rest of her ear here. And I could come back like I did with these. I started with pencil and then I outlined them with the black pen. And this is sulfite paper, which is a very thin paper, and I was playing with some watercolor and notice how the watercolor kind of went everywhere, and I was trying out some new watercolors, so which were interesting. And so I have some finishing up to do, but I loved the sort of flowy fluidity of these. These would be really fun to come back and bring some Zentangle patterns or other designs over the top. I particularly loved this one. She feels very sexy and embodied, and she's very curvy, so I loved her. This one, she felt very strong and confident. So again, I'm looking for dolls that represent some of those different aspects of myself. Like this one maybe reminds me of the little girl in me who wanted to be a cowgirl, and or a barrel racer, or to to ride horses more. I had a horse as a kid and rode a lot around the neighborhood where we lived, but it never went any farther than that. So she definitely, there's an aspect of me that is in this doll. And so that's what we're looking for in this playful journey is what are these different aspects of ourselves? So this feels like that inner wise woman, again, another very hey, very confident and strong. This one, she's a little sassy. She's holding the edge of her jacket, which I didn't quite capture. So as I'm looking at her, it's like, what's the part of me that wants to come forward in this doll? And I think it's the confident, the leader, right? She knows who she is, she knows where she's going, and which has changed from the look on this face where she's not looking at anybody or caring about anybody. So I want to shift that to something that feels a little more pertinent and meaningful to the different aspects of myself. And when I think about the different aspects of myself at various times on this channel, we've done a lot of talking about what are the different roles that we play. So it can be really soulful and healing and nurturing to create dolls that represent different parts of ourselves, right? Like, so Tori worked very professionally, right? So who's that professional in you? I was a teacher. Jen was a lawyer, right? I was often a leader, a speaker, and these are roles out in the world, but I'm also wife, mom, daughter, sister, friend, artist, facilitator, right? Like a big part of my identity is as an entrepreneur and business owner. I've been doing that for well over 20 years. So it's an important part of my identity, right? Some of the ones where maybe I continue to struggle a little bit as a daughter. There's a lot around what does it mean to be a good mom, a good wife as my kids get older, as my husband and I go into our third decade together, right? So thinking about all these different roles, what do they say about us? Are they meaningful to us? And when we're in midlife and things are starting to shift, when we become retired and let go of identities and roles that haven't served us. Maybe we get divorced. Maybe we become orphans as our parents pass away. Like all these things have an impact on our identity. So I want you to think about how paper dolls become just a really playful way to look at these aspects of self and think about them a little bit differently and notice how they're simply a part of ourself. We can get very caught up in our identity. And when we shift roles and we no longer have that focus, it causes an identity crisis. So whatever it is that you used to do and you no longer do, it has an impact, right? It has an impact. After two hip replacements. Oh, Teddy, you think maybe that impacted? Yeah, it's fascinating to think about that, right? It's like, oh, did wearing all those high heels have an impact? So I'm going to come in with some neocolor twos. If you're not familiar with a neocolor two, this is a water soluble crayon by Caran d'Ache. And it is one of my favorite tools. It's funny, it doesn't, oh, there's one that says it by Caran d'Ache. And I love these. They are very heavily pigmented, beautiful color. You don't have to get a ton of color on the page. So I'm going to start with her body parts. And I'm going to blend a few different colors together. They have such a beautiful wide range of pinks and browns and golds and olives that blend beautifully for every skin tone. And while I love working with the collage elements because I think it helps us tap in intuitively to some different parts of ourselves, there's something about painting the dolls that also feels quite empowering. So I'm going to scrub pretty hard. That pencil is still going to be there, which is fine. But I want those colors to mix. And I'm okay if some of that pencil lead mixes in there. I'm going to try not to get this too wet because I don't want to lose all my lines or have it flow too far out, even though I'm going to cut it out. Come in with a little shadow, and you'll discover what kind of paper that you love working with. Interesting, that one didn't mix that well. I'm noticing this paper is pilling a little bit. So I'm not sure I'm going to love that. So trying to bring back some of those shadows. The other thing about working with faces and figures through this perspective is, oh, it's so funny, it stands out a lot more there, is that we can see where that shadow falls, right? So we can see that that shadow is here and on the front of her neck, and her face is fully lit up, right? So there's not a lot of shading on her face. And I may come back when this is dry and add even more white to bring some of those highlights in. I love all of these figures notice that her cheek color is pretty bold, but all the lips are red, right? Okay, so I'm not loving this paper because it's pilling up under this surface. Good to know. And I saw most of my markers are over on the other side of the studio. Don't be afraid to mix your supplies. I want to have some of these for the detail. Fine tip paint markers are great and they will blend with everything else. And then I don't feel like I'm losing the detail. I have a couple of them here. The detail that I want to hold on to. And what I'm noticing is that I love the combination. So this is starting to feel, so my grandmother, when she passed away, we found a book of fashion paper doll illustrations that she had done that were just ink and watercolor. And so this is reminding me of that, again, that nostalgia of fashion illustration. And I'm sort of fascinated at myself because I never played with dolls as a kid. I was way more into animals than I was into dolls. But there's something now, I think, just because of my love of intuitive collage, that is really calling me to create in this way. So notice your own interests. Like, why are you being pulled to this or called to it? I mean, they're fun for sure. I think there is that sort of childhood nostalgia. And maybe you guys can share in the chat, what is it that you're loving about this paper doll series and how it's serving you. They're definitely fun to create, but my personal intention for myself, right, there's more to it than that. It's a different way of working with intuitive art. Again, just paying attention to how the colors blend, where things are falling on her face. And then once I get the body part done, I get to have a lot of fun with the clothes. And this is where I think both my inner artist and my inner child get pretty excited, is about designing what it is that she's wearing. And I was working on my own introspective journaling this morning, and one of the prompts that I was working with was, how can the way I dress or the way I move express my authentic self? So there's something about the dolls that makes me think about, well, how am I standing? How am I moving? Right? What am I wearing? What do I want to be wearing? So for me, as I'm looking at this and I ask myself this question, I'm like, I would want to be wearing something way more flowy. So maybe all of a sudden, that skirt needs to grow. I would be wearing a lot of jewelry as well. So she needs her. I do kind of like the button up idea of the dress. And I just noted there's, a little bit of a split here where we can just see her legs there. And maybe she just needs a little more feminine shape. So once you have that main shape down, then you can come back and really start to make her your own, right? So I can make her a little hippier in there and really have some fun with saying, all right, how does this represent an aspect of me and what aspect? Tori says, I love paper dolls as a girl, and now I love the introspection and figuring me out. Beautiful. Always played with paper dolls by a weekly girls comic called Bunty. Oh, I love that so much. I've noticed recently in the Daphne's Diary, which is a beautiful magazine out of the UK, she often has paper dolls in it. You love using paper dolls as a way to remember aspects that you've forgotten. Yeah, beautiful. I love that. Love that. And it's amazing when we start to do this kind of introspective exploration, what shows up? Like memories, perhaps, that we haven't thought about in a really long time will start to show up. So I'm looking at this and I am noticing that I'm being very drawn to some turquoise and purple colors here. I have always loved bright colors. Never really loved wearing pink. I think probably much to my mother's chagrin. I think she would have loved to have had a girly girl, but didn't really get one in me. My brother cares way more about clothes and how he looks than I ever have. So my feeling is here that I want to get some base color down and then maybe come back with some patterns over the top. And maybe she's going to have some bright blue eyeshadow because this is 1979 after all. Definitely need that bright blue eyeshadow to represent this aspect of self. And what I love about this process is as we're co-creating these, like no two of us are going to have the same dolls or the same parts of self, right? We are all having different magazines that we're starting from. We all have different parts of self that we are exploring. And today I worked very intuitively by picking an image I was drawn. You loved that blue eyeshadow. I can totally see you loving that. where we can, I very intuitively chose the figure that spoke to me today. But this work can also be very intentional. Perhaps you're doing, and we're going to have probably a whole month of inner child work as well. I haven't quite figured out when that is in the outline, but we're going to do some inner child work and work with different aspects of our inner child. Aw, thanks, Lorraine. Yeah, she's pretty, isn't she? Um, but we can be intentional. So if there's an aspect of yourself you're wanting to cultivate or have a dialogue with, you can flip through magazines, photographs, images online, looking for a doll that represents that aspect. For example, perhaps there's a part of you that is grieving your loss of identity as a professional. Perhaps you have recently lost a loved one and there's a part of you that is grieving. So you should have a grieving doll because they allow us to honor and acknowledge all of the feelings, the experiences, the emotions. And the more we honor and acknowledge all of our feelings and emotions, the more they come out on the page, the faster that we move through them, the healthier it is not to have them sitting inside. Maybe you're looking back at life, moaning opportunities that were lost, things that you thought would happen that never did. Okay, I'm really in love with my colored pencils here and her funky, colorful dress. It just feels like it kind of all wants to flow together. All of a sudden, I had this memory of my childhood version of the movie Sleeping Beauty. And there's one point where the three little fairy godmothers are trying to make her a dress in the Disney movie and they can't decide on the color. So she's standing there, Sleeping Beauty, in this dress and it's changing colors from pink to blue to pink to blue as they're trying to figure out and debate on the color of the dress. And that's what made me think of this, right? So memories like that emerge, like trust the memories are surfacing for a reason. So what aspect of me is Sleeping Beauty, right? What aspect of me is waiting to be rescued? Perhaps. What aspect of me is that curious girl who went where she wasn't supposed to and pricked her finger on the spindle? But this one definitely feels like the confident leader, right? There's a lot of pride here, a sense of I know who I am and I know where I'm going. She's not showing off for anyone else, just for herself. And I do like the black outline, so I think I'm going to go back over her and get the hand-drawn element that's a little more sketchy element there. And I love her. It feels like she's the beginning of a story, right? Like there's more coming for her. So maybe there's some symbols or elements or a particular background that she wants to inhabit. Get a little smaller brush here. I love that she's so colorful. No dull navy blue suit for this chickie poo. I never worked in corporate, so I never had a job where I had to wear suits. So I was much more likely to be wearing long, flowy skirts and lots of big, funky jewelry. That's the one sad thing about Zoom and teaching so much online. I don't go anywhere anymore, and I have a closet full of jewelry that I rarely wear. Okay, so we need to see that she's got both her legs up in there a little bit. And it doesn't take a super wet brush to do any of this. So it feels like she needs some decoration, she needs some jewelry, right? I kind of maybe she needs something dangling. And this for me is the fun part. Oh, Debbie, welcome. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for being here. I am an open book for sure. And I just believe deeply in the power of art to help us heal, to explore the many different parts of ourselves, many of them that maybe you're raised in a family where you weren't allowed to express those parts or to be fully your most authentic self. Like we had a conversation somewhere the other day about, I was in somebody else's group call that I was on about anger. And, it wasn't okay for me to express anger. As a girl, it was okay to cry and have tears. But anger was not an emotion that was tolerated. And I would get in trouble when I expressed anger. And I get it, like I'm not blaming my parents, but learning to be with someone's anger is challenging. Huh. You tried to make your blue and black suits feminine, ruffled skirt, floral heels, pretty tops. I love that. I love that. So, not willing to sacrifice your femininity, but still feel confident and professional. Beautiful. Yeah, it was wrong to be angry, which is ridiculous. All emotions are valid. And what a better place this whole world would be if we learned healthy expressions of anger and we learned how to not pour our anger onto other people, but instead to just be able to say, I'm angry about this and here's why. Here's how this impacted me. Okay, loving the sort of sketchy lines, little sexier there. I like this pen too. So again, this is watercolor paper with Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2 water-soluble crayons. Just a plain old mechanical pencil. And this is a Uniball Signo 207 gel pen that has a nice flow and it's just not having trouble going over the waxy crayons. So love her, super confident, love how she's standing. All of a sudden I'm having some vision. If you know me even a little bit, you know that I love animals. My personal painting practice, I paint a ton of animal paintings. I have a beautiful new retreat coming up in mid-May about painting spirit animals, and I almost I know, right? Lori, where am I off to? And I'm seeing like, what's the animal that would mirror her confidence? It almost feels like she needs some type of companion. And at least for 1 month, maybe more, we will certainly do some animal paper dolls as well and get a little funky with our combinations of things. I almost always cry when angry. Right. And then people think you're weak. But tears are simply an expression of emotion. Oh, Tori, a peacock. That would be super fun. Maybe she needs some peacock feathers, right? So, this is where I get to continue to go deeply into this process and let her emerge and evolve. So, as soon as Tori said peacock feathers, I had an image. Do I have a piece of scrappy bit of paper here? Well, look at this. I have this beautiful green shimmery paper here, some little scraps of this. What if she did have some peacock feathers to add to that? Then all of a sudden it feels like Barry Manilow and Copacabana a little bit, which feels super fun. I was feeling lion or big cat energy, that sort of, sensual striding of I know my power. I don't need to, show it off. But yeah, it feels like she's going to need some feathers. I'm also thinking she needs some jewelry and even maybe some slow stitching. So I want you to think out of the box with your dolls and not be limited to collage or paint and paper, but to think of a variety of different ways that you can work with your dolls. So I'm going to get her cut out here so that she's movable. She also feels so. Last week, when I was working with my core values dolls and created a landscape for them to show up in, it was a mountain landscape, a nature path, but she feels like a total city girl, like confidently walking down the streets of a big city. And all of a sudden, she starts to come to life when I cut her out here. And if you're hanging out watching and you haven't said hi, I'd love for you to pop into the comments and say hi. And I'd love for you to share your own paper dolls. We have 2 ways to do that. So if you are part of the Paper Doll Chronicles email newsletter list, we have added to our site a forum for sharing your paper dolls. I need to take some pictures of mine and go share them over there. I'd love to get some conversation started. And if you're on Instagram and you're creating dolls, I'd love for you to tag me using Paper Doll Chronicles and at Dr. Minette Riordan. So hashtag Paper Doll Chronicles. Now that I have her cut out, I'm looking at those green feathers going, okay, I want feathers, but not those feathers. They're too green. She needs feathers that match. It's funny. I've never someone who was super matchy. Still am not. My husband laughs at some of my outfits. And Jen, I totally get it about the having your yoga pants be your uniform. It's the truth. I always say that I'm internet dressed when I'm dressed from the neck up in a nice blouse and makeup and jewelry. But then, I've got my house slippers and crazy socks on. Hey, Carol, good morning. All right. So I do not have an X-Acto knife, do I? Oh, there is one. Over here, let's see. Get the back of this spiral notebook here, and I'm going to cut this out with an X-Acto knife. I don't know how dull this knife is, but I want her to be completely cut away from her background, because again, that frees me up to put her onto other backgrounds. Okay, not a very sharp knife. Definitely time for a new blade. And I can just go slow and be patient. And this past weekend, while Brad was watching football, I had fun coming down and painting a bunch of the paper doll faces that are part of the email community. And I'm looking at the faces, and they're quite large. And so I'm liking these little bit smaller dolls, but I see kind of a whole village of bigger dolls coming to life as well. And sometimes I'm looking at these faces going, what is the body that's going to go with the face? So we can start this process in so many different ways. But what I love about starting with these magazine images or illustrations is the simplicity of it. It's a very low barrier to entry if you're newer to mixed media art. We recently moved my 83-year-old dad from Texas to California. He's now living in a nice apartment close to my brother. And we cleaned out his house, and my stepmom had an amazing collection of costume jewelry of all kinds, including some different broken bits and old pieces, and I brought all of it home to play with. And so I'm looking at this doll thinking that I want to grab some of that jewelry and see, like, she definitely needs to get zhuzhed up a little bit. Like, there's more to happen. So now that I've cut her out, still thinking about the animal, still thinking about the feathers, but maybe what she really wants is a hat, maybe some kind of little, well, that's hilarious. That looks like a sombrero. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, so there were always a lot of sombreros around, but maybe it's a hat that she wants. So have fun, like literally asking your doll, what is it that you want, right? What do you need? What else do you want? So she's definitely wanting some long chains. I think I'm going to come in with some embroidery floss and do some stitching on her. I could even maybe put some little brads in here like they're buttons. Good morning, Blanca. I'm glad you're here. Your artist pants. I love that. Awesome. Layers of kitchen foil to sharpen your blade. That's a good idea. I have a whole stash of replaceable blades and a whetstone and all the things, but not necessarily down here in this studio. I did not know that cutting tinfoil would sharpen a blade. I learned something new today. Yeah, she definitely needs something, and I'm appreciative of everyone's suggestions because it's often things that I don't think of. So maybe a feather boa would be really fun. I also have this like gauzy bag here that I could cut apart. I really love the ribbon on this. So maybe she wants some fabric added over the top that's stitched on. So lots of ways and directions to go, but you can see as I sit here and connect with her, I'm just in this place of curiosity. So as I look at her right now, this just feels like one layer, right, of working with this particular doll. And then I'm always going on the back side of the doll and writing what was I thinking and what does she represent, right? So this is, I would say, my confident leader self. I know who I am and where I'm going. And that's not always true, right? That's not always true. There's times when that's true. Oh, that's a good idea. That makes it easy, Lorraine. There's times when I am this confident self, and then there's times when I am also still that person struggling with self-doubt. Am I doing the right thing? Where am I going? Is this going to work? Or still in that place of, is this person going to like me? Like, no matter how old or how confident we are, we all still have that little child within who just wants to be seen. All right, I'm slitting open the end of this bag. I'm going to try that idea. I love it. It takes a village to make a paper doll. Okay, see if this, I don't think it's quite wide enough. So we might have to slit it a little bit more. Look at that, genius. I love it when things come together easy. All right, so I'm going to have to slit, I think, the sides down here so it flows a little bit and she lies flat. Reminds you of your pantyhose. I love that. Okay, you might have lost me for a minute. I got a note that yeah, totally fighting pantyhose. Yes. Don't miss those days either. Okay, so that gives me ideas about where to go. Again, I think I want some stitching. I want this a little more fitted. And one of the things, like, don't be afraid. So as I'm doing this, I'm noticing, all right, I'm going to cut slits here under her hands. Because I'm going to want this fabric to, I'm going to start with this end for a minute just so I can get that fabric to come all the way up and tuck under, right? So I just want that to go underneath her hands. So don't be afraid to move those parts around a little bit to get them going. And I like that boa idea. So I have so many of these little gauze bags floating around, so I'm not sad at all about cutting up this pretty blue one, figuring out where it's attached. So this will kind of give me that idea of, like, where is it that I'm going? What is it that she wants? Does she want something that's sort of, that little bit of color matchy? It feels like she wants maybe some gold baubles, but I kind of like that as well, that little bit of shimmer. Then she's going to have her shimmery skirt. Good morning, Karen. Just finishing up this morning. All right, so now I can really start to see kind of like the little bit of that belt look, so I might even cut her hands a little bit more. She just needed this, she needed a little bit of shimmer, right? So I'm not sure she needs anything on her head, but maybe. But just adding those little elements, not quite finished. I need my needle and thread and some other elements to add, but I love how this confident aspect of myself came together today. It took a little bit longer actually than I thought it would, but I had a ton of fun creating her and remembering that I can give myself time to sit with each of these and let them become these beautiful versions of themselves, right? Like it's really, yeah, she is very classy, isn't she? And it feels like she wants to hang up somewhere where I can see her and be reminded when I'm, running around in sweatpants and house slippers and pajamas most of the time, that there's that part of me that loves to dress up, that loves the classy elegance, that doesn't get enough opportunity to wear dresses, and I should just wear them around the house. So thank you everyone for being here for the Paper Doll Chronicles. And this is a way that we can use magazine images as inspiration for our paper dolls and take them and make them completely our own. I can't wait to finish mine either this afternoon when I have a little bit of extra playtime. Love where she's going and appreciate all of you joining me live. Thank you for watching the replay as well. Again, hashtag Paper Doll Chronicles. If you will share your doll on Instagram, be sure and tag me. And for those of you that are in the email list, I'm going to get some conversations going in our forum. I'd love to see what it is that you're working on as well. So wishing everyone a beautiful, beautiful rest of your day, whether you are joining me live or catching the replay. And remember to click that like button, let people know that this is a video worth watching. Appreciate you guys. Bye, everybody.